because like he got me into grappling range and then like took me down and was like, got me into a hold, and it was
Hold on,
just.
so you guys sparred like it wasn't just point sparring. It was like
Yeah, sometimes we called it scrappling.
nice. Nice. That was one thing that I wish we did at our dojo of like we kind of separated the two of like it was pretty much all right, you got point sparring and you try and do the whole kumite. You get your sparring pads, you get your helmet, you get your foot pads, and then punching, kicking, all that. And then it was a whole other discipline of all right, take that off, put your mouth guard in. I mean, you should have your mouth guard in for sparring as well, but and now you're on the floor grappling. It was a completely different day.
Yes. And that's pretty much how we did it too, but occasionally we, combine the two. And yeah, I miss that dude.
Yeah. That what was some of your favorite what was your favorite discipline that you guys studied under?
So
or I guess my favorite range rather.
Yes. Oh, kicking by far. That was my greatest strength.
You got some long legs.
Yeah, exactly. That was, and it was kind of my greatest weakness too, because one of the reasons why I talk about Sensei Travis getting in really close and grappling me, like I was not the greatest grappler, right?
Okay. Yeah.
But as long as I kept people away from me, I was typically good. And so that was my favorite discipline was, kicking. And that's something that Sensei picked up on, and she really tried to hone that skill a little bit. Okay, my favorite move was the linear front kick, where you're basically jumping forward and kicking. So you're using the momentum from the jump.
Oh, yeah.
To close the distance even quicker. But...
Oh, yeah, there was a...
Yeah.
I never did, a whole lot of jumping kicks, but there was definitely... It was almost like a tradition of... For the belt tests that I did do, or that were a bit more formal, I would typically knock the wind out of whoever I was sparring at least once. Well, mostly just
Dude,
once.
A kick to the solar plexus will do it for you.
It wasn't like I was trying to hurt the guy. It was just that he charged and I front kicked him.
Yep.
And I mean, when two things are heading towards each other, it's pretty hard to pull back on one, while they're still charging.
Or are you using his momentum against him?
Exactly.
I learned this the hard way in a tournament.
I can imagine. Yeah.
So.
But yeah, I mean that's always it in a fight. It's golden, but when you're trying to keep your sparring partner alive, it's a little messed up.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that was always a fun move. I also loved, speaking specifically in the kicking range I love the side kick of just because you can fake it. Of you go you fake the roundhouse, and then you just instead of coming around, you come straight in.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
You telegraph the roundhouse.
You chamber to look like you're doing a roundhouse, and then you go in for a side kick.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah, and the combination of both as well, of just you don't know which is which. And my sensei taught me there's so many I guess fundamental moral lessons that you can learn from martial arts as well.
Yes.
Which is part of the reason why I love it, but my sensei was saying that the best fakers don't fake often. And so when you're when you're sparring, you have to start off true and actually attack. Because otherwise, they're not going to buy the fake.
Yeah.
And if you start off faking and then you throw the punch, then they're going to know which is which pretty freaking easy, because they see that the punch is a freaking punch. And then but then if you start off swinging and then throw one in that's a fake, then they believe that that fake is really coming. And then you swing around the other side and they're focused on the fake, which doesn't exist.
Yep.
And then
it's all mental chess.
Yes. Yeah.
But a lot more physical.
A lot more physical. Yeah. I mean, that's part of the reason why I love grappling so much. Just like on the ground Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu is like, he did this exercise where, I don't know if you call it an exercise, but he was like, all right, close your eyes and let's grapple. Didn't change a thing.
Interesting.
Because as long as you're connected, it's the same thing. Because you have sensation all over your body. I mean, most people.
Right.
But so if they're grabbing you, you know what hand they're grabbing you with. And then by how much pressure is on which part of their hand, you can typically understand where their body is in relation to that hand.
Okay.
And then if they're connected with whatever other body parts, it's like, okay, you can pretty much extrapolate from where they're touching you, where they are at in space. And then you can act accordingly. And especially when you're in, like, you know, side control or top mount or whatever, like, you're very connected. And so then it's like, there's literally no need for vision at that point, which is very cool. But then it was always like, I mean, when you were talking about the purple belt smackdown, I love that. I did that in a much less formal way and talking about your sensei that treated you like a bug in a spider web.
Yes.
There's this, I specifically remember this one kid that I was like helping out my sensei, and we were just like paired up with the kids and mostly just trying to make the learning environment a little bit better. And so this kid was just not necessarily actually beating up on the other kids, but he was he was clearly better than the other kids, but he was flaunting it. And so I was like, okay, kid, like, don't do that. And so, like, I'm happy that you're good at this. Like, that's not what I'm like angry about, or
it's
like
the flaunting.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And so I paired up with him, and I kind of ragdolled him.
Oh, you were like the Sensei Travis for this guy.
Yeah,
I love it.
So I know I could have done it in a better way, in a more giving him more opportunities to show his skill and not actually flaunting it, which my sensei was phenomenal at. But yeah, I definitely like just kind of sat on him a little bit and just been like, listen, kid, you're not as good as you think you are.
Right.
Like, chill. Cooperate with your peers, and this is a mutual learning environment. This is not I'm gonna smash you.
And that was, again, kind of going to the kind of big picture things about martial arts that I really like, is you get comfortable with the fact that, okay, I'm not the, most badass guy in the room, right?
Yeah.
Like, and you are there to learn. and to help others with learning. And so there is, there's definitely some individual glory that happens that can kind of get to your head a little bit.
Of course.
But for something that's not a team sport, there is a real sense of community where you are humbled a little bit, So it's all
sense?
good. Humble, again, like with the stuff you were talking about, where you can get good at something, but the second you start gloating, there's always going to be somebody else that puts you in your place, right?
Oh yeah.
If it's not another student, it's probably your sensei.
Sensei.
Yeah. And it's like with my sensei, I never sparred her because she didn't really spar. But she would do these holds on your hands that were designed to make you feel very uncomfortable. You know what I'm talking about? I forget what they're called.
That sounds more Aikido type stuff.
Yeah. And she was very good at those. It would just be like, she'd be doing a demo and she'd be like, okay, James, come up here. And I'm just, chilling there with my hand out. And she's like, okay, I want you to attack me or whatever. And then she'd just do something where like my body turns into this like
noodle.
Yeah. It's just like, ugh. It's like those, I just watched The Equalizer with Denzel Washington recently. And he does a lot of those moves to people, and I'm like, yep, I remember those.
Yeah, that's not fictional. That's legit. Yeah.
So.
Yeah, there's definitely a few of those moves of like, it seems ridiculous, but then you get into that sort of position, and you're like, oh hello,
my gosh.
I'm awake.
Yeah, it's kind of wild. So.
Yeah.
She had a very different style of fighting and teaching than that other Sensei Travis.
Clearly.
Yes. But it was kind of cool to see both,
Yeah, for sure. No, yeah, there was speaking of different like sensei styles, or more so like your sensei showing their knowledge, I guess. And so my sensei was very involved with the kids, which was super cool. And obviously he was excellent at showing that he's better,
mm-hmm.
but also allowing you to score a point or get into a good position, or I don't think he ever got submitted, which is a whole other conversation.
That reminds me of something that my sensei shared with me when I was studying for my black belt. And that's the difference between difference between a brown belt and a black belt is a brown belt, and I'm paraphrasing what she said.
Yeah.
But basically a brown belt will beat the tar out of you and not hold any restraint, right? A black belt knows how to exhibit control over their body, where they don't necessarily have to do that to overtake you, right? It's that same principle you were just talking about, where your sensei was able to show that he was a better fighter, but do so in a way where in a training environment, he's allowing the other person to still, learn some things.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
Yeah. And demonstrate that they're not a complete idiot.
Mm-hmm.
But there's and so like him and I would roll quite a bit, and it was fun because he knew that he could go a little bit harder on me,
mm-hmm.
which was always fun. There was a few times where it was definitely that like spider playing with his food.
Yep.
But there was because I did gymnastics for freaking like 9 or 10 years, something like that, before I went into martial arts. And so I had pretty sufficient body awareness, mm-hmm. and where my body was at in space. And so there was a few times where he would we'd be rolling, and I remember this one time where he like flipped. We essentially started barrel rolling down the floor, and like we got up afterwards and we were like still going. And I remember he was just like, okay, that was fun. And there was one time specifically we were training judo, and he was I was just being his ragdoll for the kids, and he did some throw. I can't remember exactly what it was, but he threw me like he swept my legs so hard that I full on did a front flip and landed back on my feet.
That's wild.
And he I don't know. I don't exactly know why that happened, but afterwards he pulled me aside and was like, yeah, there are some people in judo tournaments that they're so good, they will do that on purpose, and then they will land with their foot behind the other guy and then flip them.
Wow.
I'm like, that's wild. That's insane. That's such a gangster move.
Yeah.
Like, man, I would love to see that in like a legit tournament.
Right.
That's such a I can't even imagine being on the receiving end.
Right.
Like,
yeah.
you
that
just
would
be like, you win. Like there's no chance of actually like recovering from that.
Right.
But yeah, what I was originally getting at with that, of like showing your sensei, showing their teaching style and skill, is that so our sensei and I would roll, we'd spar and that sort of thing, and he'd let you get a few points, but he'd always come out on top, which is fair. But there was one day, it was like, so I was on the grappling team, and we essentially, for each discipline, we had like a special team that would get together like once every like month and a half or something like that. And we'd specifically train that discipline, and it was like twice as long as a class or whatever it was. And but it was his birthday on the grappling team's day. And he was just like, all right, I'm gonna try and get as many submissions as I am old. That's crazy. He had like 10 minutes to do it or something like that. And so it was and he was 40.
Oh wow.
And so we were rolling, and he was just ragdolling all of us for 10, 15 minutes or whatever it was. And we were all just like, okay, yeah, we suck.
Yep.
And you actually got to see like how good he actually is. And there were a few of us that were a bit harder to submit than others. And it was kind of funny because those people were like, yeah, I only got submitted twice. And then the kid behind him is like, I got submitted like 4 times.
That's pretty funny.
In like 2 minutes. But yeah, he was so good. So good. I miss that.
Yeah. Part of me would want to do it again, but I don't know. It just kind of depends.
It'd be interesting to...
I'd love to teach it.
Okay.
I'd love to pass the skills on, and I'd obviously need to refresh on the material that's taught a lot. But that is something, and I've never talked with Benji about this, but people have said like, oh, what if you, your brother-in-law, and Benji like
started a school?
Yeah, and like started instructing people, and I'm like, right now I don't think that would work because both Benji, myself, and Tristan are all really busy for various different reasons. But it's like that idea of continuing that legacy that Sensei started with me and with other people. I don't know. It's appealing.
Is
I
that school still going on, or is
Nope,
that okay?
they're gonzo.
Gotcha.
And one of the things I really appreciated about our school is it was so Christ-centered. Oh my
Gotcha.
goodness, we opened every single lesson in prayer. Sensei would give us, moral object lessons with some of
Yeah.
the stuff that we'd, talk about. And it's one of those things where because I trained under her, even though I've trained how to fight, because I've trained on how to fight under her, I'm hopefully probably the least likely person to get into a fight
Oh
because we
yeah,
talked tremendously about, like, okay, how do you avoid conflicting situations? How can we
definitely.
be peacemakers as Christ has called us to? And so,
It's so funny with the dichotomy of you're training how to fight so that you can avoid a fight,
exactly,
and
exactly.
it's
I was explaining that to somebody once. It was this gal that was asking about it, and I quoted Karate Kid, right? Because Karate Kid say that, like, I train so that I don't have to fight. And she's like, what does
yeah,
that mean?
yeah.
And it's, you don't really get it until you're, I guess, thinking about
It's
it.
definitely hard to explain. I
Yeah.
think um, there was kind of like a uh, theoretical story that my sensei would tell of like, okay, who has more power, Spider-Man or the Hulk? The Hulk destroys everything in its path,
Mm-hmm.
and but Spider-Man, when he fights someone, he catches them in a web and subdues them, and then they get to go about their life. Hulk kills them.
Yeah.
Who has more power?
Spider-Man.
Exactly. I mean, there's
It's
obviously
it's the difference between brown belt and black belt discussion from earlier.
exactly. Yeah.
If you have control, you know, and you're less destructive, that takes tremendously more skill and is more merciful, right? Because you're able
Definitely. Yeah.
to, yeah.
It's how can
It's
you
the difference between a monster has tremendous strength and is able to overpower things, but it's a monster, right? Like, it doesn't have any moral compass. It's just,
exactly.
kind of
Yeah.
versus, the kind of masculine strength that we're called to as men in particular, um, that God wants us to have, is the sort of, like, you have that same strength as the monster, but you're not using it in a you have a gentleness in spirit where you're not going to use that in a way that's evil. Does that kind of make sense?
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's a
You have restraint.
definitely. Yeah. It's the um I mean, to a certain extent, it's funny cuz I feel like uh there's always two extremes, and Christ calls us to that happy medium in that, like, uh or I wouldn't necessarily say medium, but in this discussion it's you have the naive weakling that gets pushed around and falls into traps and
Mm-hmm.
gets beat up and all this, and then there's the monster that's the complete opposite, that terrorizes people, that beats up those naive weaklings. But then there's the person that has the capability of being a monster, but who
But who
withholds
restrains
that.
the monsters and protects the people? You know what that reminds me of? There's a quote in the movie American Sniper
Great
where,
movie.
yeah, where the dad is talking to his son, and he says, "Son, there's three types of people in this world." I'm not going to try to do the Texas accent, but there's three types
You
of people
try.
in this world. There's wolves, sheep, and sheepdogs. The sheep get picked on by the wolves, and the sheepdogs protect the sheep from the wolves. Now, son, I didn't raise a sheep. and I certainly didn't raise a wolf. So you got to be a sheepdog. I'm paraphrasing, but that was a powerful, quote from it. Even though like I don't necessarily like categorizing people as like weaklings, but like I guess, it's there is a component of there are some people who know how to fight. What's that?
I'm a little more brave than you are.
I know, right? But it's
I
like,
wouldn't say brave, maybe brash, but
yeah. But it's like there are people who know how to fight, and there's people who don't know how to fight, and I think,
and there's a certain confidence that comes with the ability of knowing how to fight as well.
Right.
Of like you can carry yourself in a. I know that if something goes wrong,
I'd be able to handle myself.
Exactly. Yeah.
And protect the people around me, which again I think is a very masculine concept too. That's a part of a healthy masculinity.
Definitely. Yeah.
Because I mean, like a father is supposed to protect his wife and his kids, but sometimes dads can be a monster, right?
Definitely.
And so that's
the tyrannical ruler. I mean, that was kind of the discussion that we were talking about last night at young adults, yeah, of like the whole complementarian versus egalitarian. And I think in a way, I mean, what I was kind of alluding to at that last night was kind of what I was talking about, of like, in a way, it's kind of there's the naive version of, I mean, our discussion last night was about marriage in particular, but you can extrapolate that discussion to most things in life. But there's the naive, go with the flow, compromising and like very what do you call, not necessarily submissive, but that's not the right word.
Are you talking about the egalitarian view or the complementarian view that gets taken? Where it's like we were talking about it in the context of, because I remember your brother Nick had asked like, oh, have you guys seen like what does an egalitarian relationship even look like? And I had brought up, well, it's all the dinks, right? The double income, no kids, because I don't see how an egalitarian relationship could even function to a certain extent, just because there's certain biological things that happen when you have kids where the way men and women raise their kids are distinctly different, right? And that gets brought out a bit more. Whereas if you're both, kind of career oriented and just earning money for fun and treating your spouse as a roommate, it's like,
and a pleasure generator as well.
Yes, exactly. So yeah, and I know there's different Christians who hold views on this, but personally, like I don't see that argument from being made from Scripture, if that makes sense, for the egalitarian view. You can call me patriarchal or whatever you want, but it's just, I personally don't see it.
Well,
and that's not to say that
you're a sinner if you.
Yeah,
if you
or
I mean, you are a sinner, but
right,
more of a sinner,
or a heretic or anything like that.
Yeah,
but like. And that isn't to say that, women can't do some things that our society, ascribes as masculine things. I mean, we just had a conversation on martial arts. The person who trained me was a woman.
Yeah.
She was a mother, and she's like one of the best fighters that I know, And so, and even very different style. Yeah, exactly. They're even within that context, like Sensei Travis and Sensei Pruitt, very different, right?
Yeah.
And even like with the whole discussion on being a provider, like, and how that's a masculine ascribed role. Well, you look at Proverbs 31, where Solomon's describing basically like, hey, he's instructing his son, this is the kind of woman you want to find, to marry. And one of the descriptions of a godly woman is somebody who's industrious. Like, she's going out, she's investing in property, she's making things, but that's always kind of viewed more as like a supplemental thing, because this was not a stay-at-home dad kind of situation, right?
Yeah.
This was a wife being a helpmeet to help, together build a family and to provide for that family. So yeah, I don't think the complementarian view is that, all wives must be, stay-at-home moms and, yada, yada, yada. Which, by the way, that whole stay-at-home mentality, that's kind of a recent thing that has come out of the Industrial Revolution, with guys going off to work for the day rather than the whole family being a part of a business, right?
True. Yeah.
I mean, think about that. That's something I'm really frustrated with. Our society right now is just the way things used to be. And I got a taste of this with my own family, because we had a family business. And so my mother and father both ran this business. They operated different parts of it. But, dad would be like, hey, son, I'm going to teach you how to do something today. During the summer, and he'd take me and he'd show me how to do stuff. We owned a few laundromats where we did commercial wash and fold. Dad and I would repair machines, all kinds of stuff. And that's very different from, the job I'm in right now, where it's like, if I got married and had kids right now, like, I'm going off every day by myself to the office to work in a cubicle with a bunch of people I'm not related to at all.
Yeah, you're kind of just leaving your family.
I'm leaving my family behind, exactly. And, we'll see what God has in store later, because I'm hoping to kind of figure out what it looks like to balance my career with my future family. But yeah, I think what we think is traditional is not necessarily traditional, if that makes sense.
True. Yeah. This concludes part 2 of my episode with James McDowell. In the next episode, we will continue to our discussion into gender roles, and then move into the bulk of our discussion into Calvinism and how James has wrestled with many of the issues in that domain. And then, hope you guys enjoy.